This is not a great year to need a head coach. This is from ESPN's national analyst Dan Graziano, the top head coaching candidates for 2026. He has Vance Joseph, number one. He's the Broncos defensive coordinator. The asterisks all show guys that were head coaches in the NFL. So you got Shula, Hafley, Matt Nagy, who's an offensive guy, Saleh, defensive guy, Arthur Smith, offensive guy. The wild card he lists is Kevin Stefanski, and this is the way he explains it. He feels pretty confident Kevin Stefanski will be the head coach of an NFL team in 2026. Team might be the Browns. We don't know whether Cleveland's interested in letting him go or not. But he's been told by several people connected with situations that Stefanski would jump to the front of the line of desirable candidates were he available. Similar to Andy Reid when his tenure in Philadelphia had ended. So again, that's interesting from somebody who's really well connected in NFL circles.
Yeah.
None of those guys jump out to me. I got to be honest with you. I'm not saying, man, I got to get that guy and have him come in.
Yeah, listen, a couple things. I will say on that list, I'm kind of intrigued by Robert Saleh. You know, I wondered if his departure in New York was more draped in them catering to Aaron Rodgers' every whim and kind of how that thing went down. Because all I hear about Robert Saleh is how much his players love playing for him. And I actually think it would be interesting. Like you just had an offensive coach here, and like you said, Dave, like the offense has been bad for the Browns the last couple of years. Maybe it makes sense because the defense is the more established group, and you have kind of a foundation there to bring in a DC whose job is maybe a little bit easier, and then maybe his job is then to identify like the right offensive coordinator to get that sort of group going in the right direction. And yeah, that might mean you lose that guy eventually, but if he builds like a nice foundation of guys to sort of pass it on to, that could be huge. And maybe that person is Tommy Rees, by the way, who's been a hotbed candidate for a number of college jobs, and sounds like every time Nick Saban can vouch for him, he does. So I'm curious to see, you know, what happens with Tommy Rees as well. But I that's maybe the one on that list that intrigues me the most. If you hire Clint Kubiak, it's basically like Kevin Stefanski clone, right? He's going to run the same offense. So I don't know how I feel about that. Arthur Smith doesn't do much for me. We've seen what his offenses have looked like in Pittsburgh. But I will say this. Maybe the one name missing from that list that I think could likely be an option is John Harbaugh, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
I think if the Ravens if things continue going in the direction they are for the Ravens, if John Harbaugh became available, I know he's got some Cleveland ties too. I think that's one that the Browns would absolutely jump all over. And if Jimmy Haslam tends to, if he wants something, he usually can get it because he could throw as much money at it as he wants. So that would be the one that would be intriguing. The Steelers seem like they're sort of poised to win the division here. If Mike Tomlin became available, right? There's the Steelers connection from Jimmy Haslam's days with that organization as well. So those would be the two names that I think are still sort of like keep an eye on this, right? Because if those two teams falter at the end here, stumble at the end here, I think one is at least becoming available. And I think that would probably be a move that the Browns would probably be very much considering if it comes to fruition.
Yeah, Harbaugh would be probably the home run move for them. The other thing I would ask you, so you like Saleh. What's the difference between Saleh and Jim Schwartz? Just a thought.
Yeah, listen, it's a fair question. It's a fair question. And I do think, I mean, the biggest one being he's younger, right?
Yeah,
like he's
fair.
a younger,
yep,
up and coming guy who can maybe build that culture and that foundation. And you know, I don't know all the details of like everything that went on in New York, so that would be something they probably want to look into and understand fully before they maybe brought him on or hired him. You know, but yeah, I think that's obviously a fair point. And obviously bringing on Robert Saleh would probably mean Jim Schwartz isn't here. And I know a lot of people love Jim Schwartz. I love Jim Schwartz. He's got stories for days. He's a great coach. And he's taken this defense just to another otherworldly level. It's been so fun to watch. And listen, I'm sure people will vouch for like whoever the new coach is, bring Jim Schwartz back. And I would generally say that'd be a good idea. But I also think that's hard sometimes, and I think you can limit yourself in terms of candidates that you get if you try to force an OC or a DC on them. That's not that sometimes can be like a non-negotiable for a guy. So, you know, I don't know what all that would look like. I'd love it if they could keep Jim Schwartz here, and bringing on a defensive-minded coach probably means you don't do that. But you know, I'm not opposed to that thought if it were to work out that way. But I can see where your question comes into mind here, where it's like, what's the difference? I totally get that. I also will say this too when it comes to these coaches. Sometimes you just don't know, right? Like sometimes there's a coach that you hire, and people are like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I know with the Browns, you're definitely not going to trust them to hire some no name. I mean, look what happened with Freddie Kitchens, right? Like
Yep.
that's going to be the example everybody points to. But sometimes you pick and you roll the dice a little bit with somebody you think can be a culture builder and get this thing in the right direction. And sometimes it works out. Like we've seen other teams make those hires and it actually ends up sticking. So there's always some risk with those types of decisions. I understand why people are going to have their doubts that the Browns will identify the right guy, but I could see that I'm sure whatever move they make is going to be knocked, and there's going to be people who don't agree with it, whether it's an up and comer that we haven't heard of or a retread guy, and there'll be reasons why people hate it. But sometimes you got to give it a chance, especially I just think if the only reason you're bringing this group back is because you're like, well, we don't really like the pool of candidates that are out there. I don't know if that's like a valid reason to just run it back with a group that clearly, I think is trending in the wrong direction.